Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to be doing a bit of a debate around third-party attribution tools. So I'm joined with Brent, who's a performance manager up in Brisbane, working across Google ad accounts, spending minimum $10,000 a month. Brent's watched my third-party attribution videos and has some thoughts of his own that he wants to debate me on. So I thought I'd get him on, and here we are.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction. I thought you've had some really thought-provoking sort of topics, especially on your YouTube channel. I think probably the main thing was when you're talking about, triple whale and how you can't just rely on third-party attribution tools to be able to just give you every little bit of data. I completely agree with a portion of that. There's definitely some areas where I think that they've helped us as an agency, grow a lot of our clients' accounts as well. So I'm definitely keen to get a bit more of an understanding about your thought process and what you guys have come across with third-party attribution tools, and hopefully I can learn a fair bit from the conversation too.
Cool. I thought I'll open up with my stance, maybe like a 60-second of where I currently stand with third-party tools, and then I'll pass to you on what you disagree with. So if you look at the content that I first put out maybe a year ago, I was really pro third-party attribution tools. We had lead magnets based around third-party tools. And the logic was that I saw it as the golden bullet that's going to solve the ability for you to distribute spend efficiently across campaigns and platforms as well. Over time, as I've tried to optimize accounts towards third-party attribution signals, it hasn't been incredibly effective because of how convoluted the conversion pathways actually are of consumers, and how difficult it truly is to be able to determine what consumers are doing. And I think, funny enough, the biggest learnings that I've had using third-party tools hasn't been on big accounts. It hasn't been on accounts spending 100, 200K a month, because there's so much data, it's almost impossible to know what's going on at that scale. Where you actually learn what's happening is startups that are doing no rev at all. Because when you have no revenue and then you turn on a channel and then you start getting revenue, you can make the obvious connection that this channel equals this rev. And you can start doing that across platforms and get pretty good signals as to, okay, this is what I believe is happening, and then what does the third-party tool tell me? And then is there value in that third-party tool signal? And I've just found over time that it isn't an incredibly valuable signal, except for arguably new customer ROAS. But new customer ROAS as well is really just taking out view through attributions, and you're just looking at click attribution, which is something that I didn't know in the early days. I thought it was just a magic number, but that's where I currently stand.
Yeah, awesome. Look, I completely agree in the sense that attribution tools, they were introduced, and understanding where they first came from, right, is third-party deprecation, third-party cookie deprecation. Moving away from third-party cookies, how do we now start to accurately, gather data based on, which platforms are bringing in X customers? I've not actually really heard anyone say that it's, they found that these sort of tools work best with new clients or very small sort of businesses that are only really just getting into marketing. So that's really interesting. I definitely see how that makes a lot of sense as well. As soon as you add a new platform, and you can start to see obviously uplift in what you're doing there. It's like incremental testing, but with a whole new platform. So it definitely makes a lot of sense there. So that's probably something I'll have to look at for a lot of our client base as well. I guess probably the biggest issue there is just because some of the costs of some of these platforms, at least the ones that are worthwhile in my eyes, are very expensive. So a lot of these clients just can't really afford them. It just wouldn't make any sense as a business decision to do that either. So I guess where I stand is attribution platforms are incredible when you know how to use them and what you're looking for. I feel like if you just going to buy an attribution platform or invest into one because it makes sense and you don't really understand what they're actually used for, how to use it, what to do with your business decisions and your marketing decisions when you've already got it and further forward, then you're probably not going to find any use out of it. But if you're going into it being like, hey, cool, I want to understand which channels are bringing in most of my new customers. I want to understand a bit more about which channels are giving me the most, first click attribution, which ones are giving me the most bottom of funnel or last click attribution. That's where you'll definitely get a lot more benefit out of it. And then, of course, the main sort of point as to why you would want to use one of these platforms is your own in-platform attribution is always going to heavily over-attribute. If you go to, say, Facebook, you're scrolling through your Facebook, and then you might click on an ad, be like, cool, oh yeah, it's interesting, like it's some new little plushie toy or something like that. And then, 7 days later, you might, or 3 days later, you might go onto Google, and then you might just type in plushie toys and then convert on Google. Google's going to say that's one conversion, which is attributed to Google and because of Google, and then Facebook will say one as well. So having the attribution platform just gives you a proper understanding as to what's happening, and just basically a shit ton better than GA4, as I think most of us know. I think probably the thing I'd like to know from yourself, Nathan, and a bit more about what you've researched is coming down to how the data is gathered. Like that's what I found in my research journey when looking at attribution platforms, is modeling the data is what the platforms essentially do, but how they gather that data in the first place is what really makes a big difference. So just understand a bit more about, how do you guys usually have all of your data integrity essentially set up, or your integration set up, to make sure that you actually are gathering the right amount of data for these platforms too.
In terms of how GA4 is collecting data, or the third-party tools?
Third-party tools.
Cool. Going back to two things that you said, and then I'll loop to that, is I agree, essentially deduplication across platforms of conversions being tracked. I think that is a really strong value proposition of third-party tools, so that you're not getting double attribution. The only issue is that I would argue in most cases, you can deduplicate by yourself just by taking out view-throughs on Facebook, and by having somewhat of an understanding of which platform drives majority of customer acquisition. We have clients, maybe 20, 30%, where Google and Facebook are both good drivers of customer acquisition. But generally speaking, from what I've seen, it's kind of rare, because products are either really suited towards being profitable on Meta because they have a really cool value proposition that stands out on the platform, or they have really good unit economics on a commoditized product that has a ton of search volume that sells pretty well on Google. And so trying to take that highly commoditized, high margin product on Google and trying to sell it on Facebook is somewhat difficult because it's hard to stand out. And then vice versa, trying to take that Facebook product and sell it on Google is also quite difficult because no one's searching for it. And so I think the deduplication element is good and important. It's one of those elements, though, that I think a 30-day trial on a third-party tool, gather the data, figure out what the conversion pathways typically look like. Is Google scooping up a bunch of bottom of funnel and Facebook's getting the first click, or is it vice versa? And then just getting rid of the platform after that, I think is kind of valuable. And that's where you probably are getting an ROI on the cost. And then the other point there was first click attribution. I don't think first click attribution is really that helpful on third-party tools. And I used to always look at it like I've spent so much time trying to figure out where the first click's coming from. Because if you know where the first click comes from, you can just crank budgets there. Like if you can identify the ad and the ad set, or on Google, the ad group and the keyword that's actually driving it, literally just crank budgets and it should work. But it's so difficult to find out where that click actually comes from, because
you'll never know. You'll absolutely never know. Like we're all currently consumers to something that we're probably going to buy in 2 or 3 months' time. And if you ask me 2 or 3 months' time when I purchase something, when did I first look at that? I couldn't give you any accurate answer in any way, shape, or form. And even if I tried to make it accurate, I would still probably make it inaccurate by trying to be accurate. So like as a consumer, I'll never know where I first came from. And that journey begins so early. And it's not necessarily like the first click as well. The first click, I completely agree with what you're saying, by the way. I'm just saying is in regards to high quality data, click data is always going to be the highest quality data. View data is always going to be a bit wish-washy. It's going to be a bit, you don't know how long they actually viewed something for. You don't know how, what the sort of quality of that view was in the first place. So view data is just a good to know on a good to know basis, but never on like I need to change all my account structure and campaigns based on view attribution in any way, shape, or form. I would never recommend that. So click data is just where first click data, generally speaking, would be where we get our first touch point on where they've actually came to your website or whatever they've done. And then everything before that, they probably interacted with your business 2 or 3 times at least before then, and view might even be up around like the 10 times before they've even clicked on the first ad. So you're never really going to know where to ramp up. It just might be a good engager for where did they first inspire some sort of action to go to your website, because that right there will tell you a bit more about like what's the say it's like a meta ad, what have they seen in that ad for them to be like, oh cool, I'm gonna actually click on this now, instead of just looking at it and breezing past. There's something about this that grabbed my attention. which I think is completely invaluable. But again, depends completely on how you want to look at the data and why you want to look at the data. The data does nothing apart from just look like a bunch of numbers on the screen.
Yeah, I agree. On your question around collecting data for third-party tools, you might actually be able to teach me something here, because our approach to collecting data, I wouldn't say we have an approach. If I was to be asked that question by someone, my response would be that, and this is predominantly how we approach paid media marketing, is that we correlate everything to top-line P&L figures. And so majority of the budget test changes that we have in platform or cross-platform, it's all measured and KPI'd against profit contribution throughout that month. And so we will, for example, we'll put a hypothesis together that Google is just doing heavy remarketing, and we'll pull 2K out and we'll move it to Meta. And if we see a considerable uptick in top-line revenue and profit contribution, ideally, meaning that that spend was spent profitably, we will determine that as a statistically relevant outcome, that was the right decision. And then we'll continue to test that moving forward, rather than trying to correlate in-platform attribution figures. But I'm interested to know how we can be collecting data better.
Look, I'm no data collection expert. Like, this isn't an area that I'm necessarily super excelled in, but this is something that I found really interesting when I was researching different platforms. I'll probably go back to this one fairly commonly. I've never actually gone into a sales call and been completely unsold on the platform or wherever it might be. Triple Whale was the first and only time that's actually happened to me, because I went into it, I knew that Triple Whale was this very big attribution platform. It's very well known. It's something that pretty much every marketer knows of. But when I got in there, I was talking about view attribution, how that's gathered, and they told me that it was by post surveys or post-purchase surveys by consumers, which, as we mentioned earlier on, is just so insanely inaccurate. So as soon as I found out, that's how they do their view attributions, I kind of knew that if that's a low quality data point, what else is low quality? Started looking into it a bit more, and it's basically just like an integration with your Shopify using UTMs. Like, it's a very quick setup. And what I found is that when there's a quick setup, it usually means you're going to get poor data, which usually means that whatever findings and learnings you're going to get could actually lead you into the wrong direction as well, because you would be missing out on so much data. So what I found is, if you're gathering data through, or you've got server-side tracking, that's probably the biggest one, set up, and great. Like, it's a pretty good time to use third-party attribution tools, because you're going to be feeding so much more data to your third-party attribution tools. So that's probably the first one, is look at server-side tracking. If you can get that set up, then great, you've got more data right there. Two is, how do they stitch the data back together? So essentially what's happening with these third-party attribution tools is they're gathering a lot of like local information, such as my phone. If I go onto Google or search something and go to the website, it's then going to take down as much information about my local device as possible. When I have server-side tracking, it's going to bypass, it's essentially like a cloak to your website, which will essentially bypass a lot of these ad blockers and, to some extent, privacy settings. So it still takes some of that data with it, but any sort of other first-party data that I say, no, I don't want to be collected, it won't collect. So it now has my device ID, it's got my operating system, where I'm located, it's got a lot of information about who I am. And then, say 2 months down the line, when I've now converted and I purchased this thing online, it will take that first-party data that I've now given as a consumer, as a buyer, and then it will stitch that data back together based on previous journeys. So when that data collection all the way up until then is really high quality, that's when you see the most of the sort of benefit behind a lot of these platforms. But if it's going to be just, you purchase and then it'll be like, oh yeah, cool, like this is where the purchase came from, and some very low quality data beforehand, because you didn't have server-side tracking, so you're missing about 15-20% of data right there. You weren't using UTMs, then that's more data that's missing right there. Like, all these different things that you haven't got correctly set up, then you're going to really be kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So yeah, that's probably where I'd start, is if you're looking into an attribution platform, make sure you're gathering as much data as you possibly can. Again, like, it's probably something that, going back to one of your points, Nathan, is one thing that I learned from you guys that has helped me tremendously in my career as well, is incremental testing. It's very common that, and probably the biggest mistake I find so many marketers doing is, at least in slower seasons with ecom, if they want to test something, test increasing their budgets because things are going fairly well, wherever it might be, they'll usually take the Google Ads budget and the Facebook Ads budget, they'll increase it by, say, $2,000 a month for both platforms, and then they'll have both slightly increase. And then if the revenue doesn't massively increase, then most likely, as a good business decision would be, you drop your budget back down. What you should be doing, however, is take that $4,000 total budget, put it towards Facebook ads and leave Google ads where it is, and then notice the difference between there, find out what's working, optimize towards that, yada, yada, and then bring Google ads up once you have some sort of stability. So that is by far probably the most important metric you're going to use to be able to grow a business. The attribution platforms will just help shine a bit more light on, what's the consumer journey looking like, products, and what you were saying before is, what's the most common first-time purchase product that people are coming from, and then what's the most common return purchase product that people are coming from, and understanding that based on new versus returning customers. So it's basically just higher quality data, more of it, and you're not necessarily going to make optimization decisions based on it, but you'll get a good understanding about, okay, cool, like these sort of ads are working pretty well with first click attribution. Why exactly is that? It just helps you kind of go through that thought process a bit more. Oh, it's because we're using videos. We notice that videos are actually doing better than static when it comes to first click. Or we notice that static is doing better than videos in last click, or vice versa. Google ads don't fully understand meta. So there's probably a lot more to it. So that's essentially how I stand on when it comes to gathering data and the impact that has over these attribution platforms.
Cool. Do you think there can be too much data to where you just confuse yourself?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Majorly, especially when we're looking at different attribution models, right? Is you've got linear, you've got first click, last click. Every platform has their own model that they've created. I think Triple Whale is like triple attribution or something like that. Like they're all completely different, and they all model it in different ways. So yeah, there definitely can be too much data that it confuses you. I think probably the most important thing is, when it comes to data collection, just make sure you're not missing any data that you shouldn't need to be missing. So server-side tracking is a major fix to that. Of course, making sure your consent mode V2 compliant and all these other privacy things to make sure they're actually gathering data correctly. But then when you're actually analyzing the data, don't just flick between the models and look at all these different numbers and find out which one looks cooler. Go into it with an idea. Cool, I want to figure out how I can increase my top of funnel effectiveness, or I want to find out which creators are working best or seem to be getting the most attention, or whatever it might be. If you're going into it with a question, then the data can help you find that answer. But if you don't know what that question is, then it's going to be pretty hard to get anything out of it at all.
Yeah, cool. I've got a really hard question for you,
okay.
which is
here we go.
Which is we have server-side tracking on a lot of clients. The issue I see with server-side tracking is, in theory, it's great, which is rather than pushing, my limited understanding of server-side tracking is that rather than pushing events straight to the Facebook server or the Google server, which can get detected by an ad blocker, and then they block the signal from being sent, it pushes to a server-side server that gets registered as your own website, and then it reroutes to theirs, so that the ad blockers can't detect that you're trying to push information back to them. And so you get an extra 10 to 20%, whatever it might be, in terms of attributed conversions. The issue that we've had is it's really difficult to measure how many more conversions we're attributing. And in Google ad conversion tracking, because you can split it out for the server side and you can run your existing as well, I've seen like little to no increase on some accounts. And I've obviously then have to answer the question of, well, why are we spending $600 a month on this? And it's like, I don't know. I hope so.
Good question.
So do you know how to measure?
Yeah. And when it comes to server sides, again, it completely comes down to so many different factors, such as how much traffic are they getting per month? Is it a fairly impulsive purchase, or is it something that requires a fairly long sort of purchase decision cycle? What I generally find is in Google Ads, it's probably the most important one is like your other search terms, like missing data, like your audiences, sorry, not your other search terms, your audience data. Seeing how much of that kind of decreases. I'm not necessarily saying that you get more data based on conversions or where else there might be. I think that that's already set up fairly well within Google Tag Manager, but you probably notice that you're unassigned your audience data, for example, in Google Ads, your age, gender, whatever it might be. You probably find that that will start coming down a little bit more as well. So it's just a bit more about the actual demographic data that's being sent over to. They're probably the biggest differences that I've noticed. Again, like GA4 versus Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager uses model conversions, whereas GA4 will use observed conversions. It's pretty easy to notice the differences between those two. But to the complement of model conversions, is it still going to send conversion data when the conversion or the user wasn't directly observed? So it still has an effect of like a server-side tracking. You'll still get a lot of that conversion data coming through, but you won't necessarily get audience demographic data coming through. You depend on how you're sending the data from GA4. So if you've got GA4 hooked up with a lot of your server-side tracking as well, you'll probably notice that there are more attributed sessions through GA4. So that's probably one thing I check as well, is if you have one GA4 property that's set up through GCM or client side and then one that's server side, then you'll probably notice that there's a difference in the data that's being collected there as well. That's probably where you notice the biggest difference between the observed versus model conversions or data that's been sent through.
Yeah, cool. Final question. Do you think third-party tools are worth it?
Oh, God. Yes. I think that they are absolutely worth it. I think that if you're going into it as, say, an e-com business owner, you're going into it being like, I need to know how I can make more money directly from this. You're probably not going into the right mindset. So I think it's worth it as a marketer to know what ads are we running that are making the most impact. At the end of the day, if you give a budget, if you say double your budget on one platform and keep the other the same, so that incremental testing we were talking about before, that's always going to have a massive growth impact. You're always going to know, especially from bottom line revenue, when you look at your e-com sales data in your platform, say Shopify, whatever, you're always going to notice the difference behind growing and scaling that. If you want to go into it with, I need to understand a bit more about my consumer. What are my products that are doing well from first purchase? Where are we getting most of our new customers from? Where are we, those sort of questions. And I think attribution platforms are well and truly worth it. They're just not what you should be making every business decision on. I think that in-platform data will still tell you a pretty good portion of the story. And this is probably the biggest issue, is when people try and chase down to optimize every single dollar that's going through an account, you're just not really going to get there. There's too much data that's been hidden, missed, whatever it might be, as it always has been since the beginning of time. So if you're going into it with the questions of where are we getting new customers from, which ads are performing best in regards to capturing attention, getting people to the site, yada yada, what products are they purchasing, different questions, no doubt about you creators. On the meta side, obviously not as prominent with Google Ads. Then I think you're using it for the right reasons.
I'm going to somewhat agree with you, 6 out of 10, and I'll give you two of my counters. Number one, I think you're going to agree with both of them, to be honest. Number one is I think third-party tools are useless for e-com business owners, because I don't think that they're actually going to leverage the insights whatsoever. In fact, I'd probably argue that 95% of people that have a triple whale account don't know how to do what you've discussed, which is look at the data correctly and make informed decisions. The amount of clients that we onboard who have triple whale and they literally just use it as a dashboard to track MER spend and revenue blows my mind, that they're spending $900 for an MER tracker. And so that's number one, is as a data analyst or a performance marketer, I think there is a little bit of value in what you're saying, but I think an e-com business owner, I disagree. 99% of them won't actually use any of the insights, and therefore it's a waste of money and just get rid of it. Number two, and this is probably more directed at performance marketers and e-com owners that see themselves as good data analysts, is that I am really cautious of telling stories based on small data sets. And so this is something that I always have to remind myself of, because it's literally the detriment of my performance marketing, and it always has been, which is that I see a slight signal within a data set and then I draw a conclusion. And in majority of instances, you're trying to draw a conclusion off such statistically irrelevant data, or a piece of data that might not even hold for much longer into the future, and then starting to make decisions and pivot the way that you decide to performance market based on that one piece of data can be like really dangerous. And I've done that tons, particularly with third-party tools, which is that I've I've optimized towards first click, for example, across Facebook ads, and then just completely tanked an account because the data was just wrong, or I made the decision first and it worked, and I was like, oh, this is how we do things now. Let me tell a couple of people on the team, and let's roll this out. And then we roll it out, and it doesn't work. It's like, oh, well, we should probably validate these things first. Yes. And I think third-party tools just really give you the ability to do that at scale. Like you can draw 50 conclusions a day because you have so much data available. So I think that performance marketers that have a tendency to do that, which I think is everyone, just need to be like incredibly careful when they're drawing conclusions and looking at the data, and not to go crazy, because a client will want to make you go crazy as well, because it's $800 a month. They're going to go, I want 25 insights out of this $800 a month.
I want to be worth my money.
And it's like, we can do that. We're just gonna ram the account into a wall.
I completely agree. It should be used as a confirmation. It's not a be all and end all. It's not your North Star metric where you do everything that the platform is telling you to do. And I always find that the best results come from if it makes sense with your in-platform data and what you're seeing, and it also makes sense on what you're seeing with the third-party tool, then usually it's the right decision to do. So, for example, if you're noticing that your prospecting campaign on Meta or wherever it might be going to newer audiences, you see that this specific ad has a pretty high ROAS or Meta conversions, wherever it might be, and then your third-party attribution tool is also telling you that, great. Like that's a confirmation you needed to essentially go ham on that. So I think that's probably the biggest thing. And you're absolutely right. If a client is spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, depending on which tool you go for, they're gonna want to get a bit more out of it than I think we're doing okay. I completely agree that there's obviously some pressure behind that, but it is just there to support your theories, to support your analysis. It's not there to tell you what to do. So if you lean too heavy into it, then you're kind of leaning on a stick. It's eventually going to break.
Nice. I think we've come to an agreement.
I do. Yeah. Awesome. I'm proud of us. We've done so well.
Cool. Anything else you want to run through, Brent?
No, I think that's it. No doubt there's always smaller things you can add into it, but they're always just situation based. So I think that awesome that we've come to a conclusion on where we sit. It's nice to know that we do actually share a lot of similar sort of insights with it. So if anyone is watching this and trying to get an attribution platform, just do your research, look into it, and ask yourself why do I need it? And if you can justify that why with actual reason behind it, such as I need to know how this is doing, I need to know how this is doing, rather than I'm curious, then great, give it a go.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thanks for coming on. I actually learned a fair bit from this conversation, so I appreciate it.
Me too.
I'll link to your LinkedIn in the description below. Is there anything else you want to plug?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I'm keen to see more content from yourself about the third-party attribution tools, and always get some awesome insights from it. So looking forward to that as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Nathan.